Australian Prosecco makers are backing the federal government's decision to step away from a trade deal with the European Union. Joining us live now is Australian Grape and Wine CEO McLean. Lee, good to see you. Thanks for your time. You're joining us from Japan, I understand, where the Trade Minister, Don Farrell, made this big announcement about the tanking of the EU deal. As proposed, what would that deal have meant for Prosecco makers?
Well, what we've been concerned about for a couple of years now is this concept that we would lose the right to apply the Prosecco grape variety name to our bottles, whether that's in Australia or in overseas markets. Prosecco for us is a really fast-growing part of our wine category, and it's currently valued at about $200 million a year in terms of annual production. So that's really important in commercial terms, but also what we were equally concerned about was the precedent that it sets, because Prosecco is a grape variety name. It's not a region. It's a name just like Shiraz or Sauvignon Blanc or Cabernet Sauvignon. So without having access to these grape variety names, that sets a really dangerous precedent for other varieties in the long run as well. So we fully support the government's decision to walk away from this deal.
Okay, so in terms of the export market then, as it stands, where does that leave us in terms of where our biggest markets are overseas at the moment and how much growth we're seeing?
So our main concern was the domestic market. The domestic market is by far and away our largest market for Prosecco. And part of the reason for that is that over the years, the EU and the Italians indeed have sort of taken a number of markets away from us by signing these sorts of deals with other export markets. New Zealand is a recent example where they have gone and protected the GI Prosecco, which means their local producers can't produce wines of that variety name, and we can't send wines there anymore, or at least for another 7 or 8 years anyway. So exports are relatively small at the moment, but there's still significant opportunity in markets like the United States where we can continue to use that name, and in Singapore as well. But really, the domestic focus for us was the primary concern.
Okay, and just expand on that for us in terms of how much is really in that name, because from what you're saying, it sounds like there would be a significant impact on sales, you think, if it was labelled as something else. I mean, you know, we have sparkling as champagne here in Australia. Do you have any modelling, or have you really looked into just how big an impact it would be if we chose a different name to represent the Prosecco?
Well, it would be an enormous impact on Australian winemakers. Now, many years ago, when we gave up names like champagne, or we gave up names like burgundy, for example, we were able to fall back on the grape variety name. So burgundy is a good example where we could then use terms like Chardonnay, or we could use terms like Pinot Noir, which were actually a market advantage for us because consumers understand what those grape varieties are. But when you take the actual grape variety name away from us, we're really starting from scratch with no alternative. The EU would have you believe that a variety called Grape is what we would be using, but I'd challenge anyone to tell me the last time they picked up a bottle of Grape at the bottle shop. It's just not something that consumers understand or know about, and it would be a huge hit to the industry if we went down that path. But it looks like at the moment, for the time being anyway, we don't have to be concerned about that, because the Trade Minister's made a good decision to move away from the deal.
Yeah, I think you're right. Grape doesn't have the same sort of ring to it, does it? Not much pizzazz in that term, I would have thought. Lee, really appreciate you bringing us that view. Appreciate your analysis live there from Japan. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ashley.